Welcome to the Gaming Creepypasta Iceberg Explained Part 2. If you haven't seen Part 1 yet, I'll leave a link down in the description below. Let me start by thanking everyone who watched and commented on my first part. This is the most engagement my channel has ever received, and I'm incredibly happy about that. I also love all your comments about how the video went and what creepypastas I should be adding next. Thank you to all these folks for putting their suggestions in the comments. I have found so many new and interesting gaming creepypastas to read. Some I've never even heard of, which is pretty awesome. If you have any more suggestions for other creepypastas to be added, leave a comment down below or follow me on Twitter, where I post updates to my videos as well as ask questions about upcoming content. Alright, that's enough from me, let's get started. In the year of 1996, there was a strange surge in illnesses and suicides in children in Japan shortly after the release of Pokemon Red and Green. The deaths were related to an area in the game known as Lavender Town. Due to this, the incident was labeled as Lavender Town Syndrome. Lavender Town is a town in Red and Green that has the only known Pokemon graveyard in the series. The town is far more creepy than any other area in the game. This has led to many asking about its inclusion in a kid's game at all. The Lavender Town Syndrome actually has to do with the music in the game. It's this eerie song that drives home the feeling that the town may have some dark secrets hiding beneath its surface. The song was said to be composed of binaural beats, or two tones that when combined can make an audio-optical illusion. The original Lavender Town music had these beats, but the later entries and re-releases removed them entirely. The reason listed was because it gave listeners headaches, nausea, and according to Lavender Town Syndrome, suicidal tendencies, especially in children. Later, someone ran the Lavender Town theme through a special software, and near the end of the song noticed that some unknown had spelled out something. Unknown are Pokemon that are shaped like letters. They wouldn't be introduced until the following game. The unknown spelled out, "Leave now." Lavender Town would become a very popular spot for Pokemon creepypastas and urban legends. In 1998, just about every kid had a Game Boy Color. The handheld was very popular, but there was a peripheral that not many knew about called the Game Boy Camera. It was a tiny camera that was attached to the handheld. The camera took pictures in a very low resolution, making most of the photos look distorted and strange. You could doodle on the pictures you took, and you could also play some games that the camera came with. There was a JRPG game that you could access from the main menu if you clicked on the shoot action. The game was very simple and gave you a few more options, including shoot, items, magic, check, and run. If you were to click run from the options, then you would be greeted with this picture. A doodled man's face with "Who are you running from?" written above the distorted and creepy photo. There were two other photos you could see in the US release, but even more were available in the Japan version. They all said the same thing. Who are you running from? From the face in the picture, that's what I'm running from. There was a belief that the pictures were taken of members of a cult, and that one of the images was one of their victims. There were rumors in the early 90s of a video game console with extremely impressive graphics, gameplay, and very intelligent AI. The console was very rare though, with only 50 being in circulation. The console had a short list of games, but everyone only seemed to remember the first one on the list. The game was said to have the most realistic graphics for any video game, even by today's standards. The game had an endless supply of new content and solid gameplay. It was said that the game could almost predict how you were going to play, meaning no lag between the player and the game. The game was so perfect that literally no one wanted to stop playing. The author of the story notes that the people he talked to remembered that their parents forced them to stop playing and had even thrown out the consoles with the game. The author searched for a while after that, hoping to find someone who had more time with the game. After a month of searching, he found two individuals that had vague recollections of the game. They described the game as having a perfect interface. After he questioned further, they explained that the game seemed to have a direct effect on the player. Playing the game seemed to give the player exercise, and the player was able to go without food or water for days, like the game was providing them with sustenance. After playing the game for a week straight, they started to notice that when the character in game would get hurt, they would also feel that pain. It started out small at first, but got worse the longer they played. One of the players remembers a boss using a whip that was a one-hit kill. The pain was immense from every lashing he'd received in game. It was even worse because he had to replay the level over and over again. They would have kept playing if their parents also hadn't thrown out their consoles. For a while, there were no leads following these two accounts, until the author stumbled upon reports of people being found dead in front of bootleg video game consoles. They seemed to have a butchered appearance, with many of them being found in pieces. Autopsies later revealed that their internal organs had also been dissolved. Whenever they were found, all the responders would see were the bodies and the bootleg console plugged into a TV, playing nothing but static. A bootleg Pokemon game collector is excited to receive a new Pokemon game that he found called Pokemon Black. It wasn't Black version, but instead a hack of Pokemon Red. It followed the same opening, and the only major differences was the press start screen didn't have the Pokemon cycling through. Also, under the Pokemon logo it just said Black version. The game started as normal with the player getting to pick their first Pokemon, but no matter which Pokemon you picked, you also got a Pokemon called Ghost added to your party. He used the Ghost sprite from Lavender Town and was easily the most powerful Pokemon in the game. Ghost had one ability, Curse. When used, it would instantly defeat whatever Pokemon you were facing. What was weird was instead of the Pokeball being grayed out to show a defeated Pokemon, instead the Pokeball was just missing entirely. This was most likely to show that the Pokemon had died from the attack. Once Ghost had used Curse against the entire team of Pokemon, the trainer would show up next. The battle commands would come back up. You could run, and the fight would end normally. Or you could use Curse on the trainer as well. After the battle ended, the trainer's sprite would be missing. If you returned to the same spot at a later time, then you'd see a gravestone where the trainer used to stand. Curse could not be used in all instances though. It was useless against ghost Pokemon, presumably because they are already considered dead. It also could not be used against trainers you'd have to fight again. That is, unless it's your final battle against them, then you could use it. The game had a sudden shift after defeating the Elite Four. A box would appear with the words "many years later" written in it. The player character was now an old man standing and looking at tombstones. The game world was now as empty as your Pokemon party. Even Ghost was no longer in your party. As you traveled the world as the old man, Lavender Town's theme would play on loop. No other songs played, just Lavender Town. The player would then make their way back to Pallet Town where the game had started. Going into your house and standing on the exact spot where the game had started would start a cutscene. The game would show a Caterpie, then a Weedle. It took a moment for the author to realize that the game was showing all the Pokemon the player had used Curse on. After the Pokemon had gone by, next would be the trainers. Every trainer you had cursed would show up one by one. The Lavender Town theme in the background all the while had begun to drop in pitch until it was just a low rumble. Following this, a battle would start. The old man's sprite would appear and Ghost would be on the opposite side. The only option available to the player would be to fight. The option to run wasn't available. When the old man tried to fight, the only ability he could use was Struggle. Struggling would lower the old man's health, but it didn't affect Ghost at all. Eventually, the old man would struggle down to his last bit of life and Ghost would finally use Curse. The screen would cut to black for a final time. The player had one option, and that was to turn off the game, or let it sit on the black screen forever. Restarting the game, the author noticed that the file was gone, and had been erased like it never existed. In the world of Fallout 3, there are radio stations that the player can listen to as they travel the wastelands. The most interesting of these stations is Galaxy News Radio, DJ'd by a very enthusiastic man by the name of Three Dog. In Fallout 3, you can actually kill just about every character in the game. This doesn't include major plot-related NPCs, but Three Dog isn't considered an important NPC and therefore can be killed. If you kill Three Dog, then he'll be replaced by his assistant, who has none of the charm of her predecessor. She seems very reluctant to do the job, but will do it nonetheless. What most players don't know is that there's a way to turn Galaxy News Radio into a numbers station. It requires the death of Three Dog, and a certain number of other events must be completed perfectly in order to activate it. First off, a numbers station is a shortwave radio broadcast that rattles off numbers, usually in Morse or some other code. They were very popular during the Cold War, as they were thought to be used to transfer messages to intelligence officers. With the Cold War type setting of Fallout 3, a number station being in the game kind of makes sense. There's a certain number of specific criteria that must be met in order for the trigger to happen. Some of these include skipping missions, completing certain missions, and destroying Raven Rock. These, along with other not yet discovered criteria, will trigger the number station, as long as 3Dog has been killed. Once the requirements have been met and 3Dog is dead, if you turn on the Galaxy News radio station, you won't hear 3Dog or his assistant. Instead, you'll hear a very monotone sounding voice. It's 3Dog, but more like it's just the voice actor. He'll start to ramble off numbers in a very monotone voice. This is where the number station comes in, as users were quick to realize that the numbers were actually coded messages. The messages were in Morse code with dates attached. Some of the messages were pretty mundane, as one talked about his YouTube channel. Another message talked about how he's going to wash his car today. A lot of the messages were like this. Of course, there were some messages with darker undertones, such as one that listed the exact date and time of the death of Gary Coleman. Another message said, "The Queen has died today. The world mourns, as on days like this, we are all Brits." This one supposedly predicted the death of the Queen of England, which would be creepy if it wasn't for the fact that it predicted this would happen in 2014. There was one message that was rather vague. It said, "I can't believe they've actually done it. Not long left. The noise. I can't take the noise anymore. I have a pistol in the attic." The final coded message was timestamped for July 6th, 2027. We'll have to see if there's any significance to that date, but only time will tell. I Hate You is a Super Mario World creepypasta the author describes as not another haunted game creepypasta. The author explains how they'd played through Super Mario World so many times that they'd seen just about everything the game had to offer. One day while exploring the sunken ship level in the game, the author noticed a blind Boo hovering over the exit pipe. The only escape option was a key and keyhole above the exit that they'd never seen before. Grabbing the key and ending the level brought them back to the overworld map. A new area next to the creepy Bowser Cave entrance opened up. It looked like a whirlpool, and the author thought it must be a newly undiscovered level in the game. The author moves towards the whirlpool, and as soon as Mario stands on it, the Bowser face starts to bleed from its eyes. The title of the level was "Oh God, No," which the author brushed off as being weird, but not that odd since it was similar to the special stage names. Starting the level, Mario is stuck in a very small cavern with no room to jump and can only continue to the right. The further down Mario ran, eventually he would run into more of the blind Boos that the author had seen before. They floated ominously above the chamber. A giant bullet bill with blood running down its face barreled towards the author, and the only way for Mario to survive was to use a star. Of course, that meant he had to cheat to get the star. It made him invulnerable, and Mario was able to pass safely. The author noticed something was written above Mario in what looked to be blood. It said, "I hate you," in all caps. To the right of the message were a group of giant Boos. To the right of the giant Boos was another message. This one said, "Why won't you die?" The author was still invincible, so the Boos didn't scare them at all. They continued down to where it looked like a group of thwomps were. They all had blood on the bottom of them, as if they'd crushed hundreds of victims to death just below them. The next section the author found had spikes on the floor and ceiling, meaning you would have to swim carefully between them. Of course, having invincibility helps as well. As the author swam through the area, he noticed the lifeless bodies of what looked like other Marios stuck to the spikes. This was by far the creepiest thing the author had seen up to this point. They looked to be the lives lost by Mario as he ventured through this area before. As the author made his way to the end, the lifeless Mario corpses started to float and follow him. They were terrifying to see moving around, but the author continued. At the end of the level, there was a doorway next to a weird-looking mushroom. The author decided better than to touch it and proceeded through the door. Once inside, the author realized he was in a boss chamber, but there was no one there but Mario. There were windows behind Mario, and in the third window was a mysterious shape. A second later, and Luigi stepped out onto the platform. He stared down Mario and told him how he truly felt about his brother. Luigi attacked Mario, who was too stunned to fight back. A second later, Mario, in a fit of rage, attacked back and sent Luigi flying into the lava below. Luigi shrieked out a last phrase, "Oh God, no," as Mario cried on the platform, having just killed his brother. The game comes to an ending screen, showing Mario sitting next to Peach, and on the far right was Luigi, horribly burned and disfigured. In the early 1990s, typing games were very common. There was a lesser known typing game called Mr. Mix, which was released around the same time as Mario Teaches Typing. It starred a character named Mr. Mix who would mix ingredients into a bowl as you typed the words for him. The game was very similar to Mario Teaches Typing, which might be why it was lesser known. Another reason the game was lesser known is that it was a very hard typing game. The difficulty started out pretty low at level 1, but by level 5 the requirement became 500 words per minute, which was impossible to beat. The game was notable for having some strange background music as well. It started with low growls in the first level that would progressively get louder as the level went on. Eventually the music would get so loud that it caused permanent damage to the early computer speakers. The second level notably didn't have any music, but the third had what sounded like a low-quality recording of a hairdryer in the background. The third and fourth levels would just play a loud, high-pitched ringing sound that would persist throughout the levels. Some people even reported ear pain from the ringing sound. The design of Mr. Mix was also considered to be creepy. He was a round-faced man with beady eyes and very red cheeks. He would stare at the player as they continued to type away. Most of the children who played the game would have horrible nightmares about Mr. Mix. He would talk to them in their nightmares with his raspy, quiet voice. Mr. Mix would tell them to keep quiet about something, but it wasn't anything they could remember. It caused a few kids to develop deep psychological issues. The game had terrified them to the extent that they needed to see a psychologist. The psychologist had noted that the kids had been deeply disturbed, but no connection was ever made to the game. The game didn't sell very well for a few reasons, and almost fell entirely into obscurity. That was until a ROM of the game was discovered, with hackers immediately trying to dig through the game's files. Everything seemed fine until the hackers used a memory hack to bypass the 5th level in the game. Whenever they would bypass the 5th level, the game would crash, writing a bunch of files to the home drive of their PC. The files contained pictures of people with horribly deformed faces. They appeared to be screaming in pain and agony. Their eyes had streams of blood coming from them, and their outer layer of skin was torn off in a few places. Attempting to delete these files would cause your computer to blue screen, possibly breaking it. The hackers did find a way around this issue and were able to finally get to the last 2 levels. The original hackers unfortunately all decided they couldn't talk about it and refused to answer any questions about the game when asked. Within a month, every single hacker had gone missing. 2 years later, a man was arrested for trying to abduct a child from a supermarket. It was discovered that this man was one of the original hackers of the game. When interrogators tried to ask him any question, the only thing he would say was, "I'm Mr. Mix." NES Godzilla tells the story of a man who felt nostalgic for his old favorite video game from his childhood. He bought an NES but couldn't find the game anywhere. That was until his friend found a copy for him. The author was so excited to finally get to relive that part of his childhood and finally finish the game he wasn't able to so many years ago. The author starts the game and feels a wave of nostalgia seeing the game again after so many years. After the author gets to the first boss in the game, it glitches with red blocks appearing everywhere. The author removed the cartridge, blew into it, and then put it back into the console. After completing the area where the game had glitched, he discovered a new boss was in the game. One that hadn't been in the game originally. The author thought the game might have been a prototype version of the original. He moved as fast as possible to encounter the new enemy type. Once he got there, he had to complete a different boss first. Upon defeating him again, instead of the usual defeat animation, he instead began to almost be devoured by the same glitch as before. A similar glitch would happen with his next boss fight. He defeated the enemy and his sprite seemed to break off in fragments, almost like he was a piece of glass. This all happened before he made it to the newly implemented boss encounter. He beat that boss pretty quickly and took over the enemy base with no issues. The author started the second map and made it all the way through pretty easily. He noticed the new monsters on this map as well and made his way towards it for another fight. After fighting a different monster than the one he was expecting to, he saw a new icon on the map that he'd never seen before. The author started the level, and as soon as he did, he saw a hellish looking world with no sky and flames burning in the background. The only background music was a low drum that almost sounded like a heartbeat. At the top of the screen was one word, "Run," which confused the author as he wasn't sure what he was supposed to be running from. After noticing Godzilla was taking damage but not seeing from where, he restarted the game. The author went to the password screen and jumped back to where he was previously. He started the same level and this time he saw it. There was this red creature that he's never seen in any Godzilla movie before, right behind him, chasing Godzilla. He began to run as he heard the creature's low bellow. This red creature had spider-like legs and long appendages. It was terrifying for the author, but he soon escaped, narrowly at that. He stared at the screen for a while, but decided he would still continue playing the game. The NES Godzilla Creepypasta is a long one that is very much worth a read and deserves its own video. I couldn't do it justice in a short summary, so I will be making a full video covering the creepypasta. Until then, we await Red's return. Tails Doll is an evil entity that exists inside the Sonic R video game. He is an unlockable character that you can only get after completing the game to 100%. Once unlocked, you'll see a strange and eerie looking doll version of Tails. It is said that the Tails doll from the game can curse anyone who plays the game. If you meet certain requirements, then the Tails doll will be able to leave the game and haunt you. Of course, the first requirement is to complete the game and unlock him. Once you've done that, you'll need to play the tag game mode. You must select the Tails doll and then start the mode. Once started, you'll need to tag Supersonic. Once all of these criteria have been met, the Tails doll will appear on your screen. He will look menacing and possessed. The song Can You Feel the Sunshine will be playing in the background. The Tails doll is now haunting you. You will see him in your dreams, and you may hear him come knocking on your door. We Deleted You is the story of a boy named Kyle who received a Nintendo Wii for his 7th birthday. He was so excited to play it and his dad was more than happy to hook up the console for him. Excitedly, the boy started up the console ready to play Wii Sports, only instead of jumping right into Wii Sports, he hovered over the Mii channel. Of course, if he wanted to play Wii Sports, he'd have to make a Mii first. After starting the Mii channel, he noticed that there was already a Mii that was standing there all by itself. The Mii had a giant smile that stretched from both sides of his face. His eyes were huge and staring straight forward, and for some reason, he was bald and didn't really have a nose. His name was Edeled. Kyle ignored the Mii and started to make himself into a Mii, as most people do. His Mii came out looking pretty good, but when he got back to the Mii Plaza, he saw Edeled standing there and staring at him creepily. Edeled creeped him out enough that he decided to delete him. It was only at this point that Kyle realized that Edeled was delete spelled backwards. A strange choice of name, he thought. Kyle moved on to Wii Sports and started to run through the different sports you could play. He was drawn way more to bowling though, as it was his favorite of the sports in real life. After playing for a while, another Mii threw his ball and got a strike next to Kyle's Mii. When he turned around to celebrate, he recognized the Mii immediately. It was Edeled, even though he'd been deleted already. Kyle closed out of Wii Sports and went back to the Mii channel to delete Edeled for a second time. Before he could, Edeled spoke to him in a very deep and distorted voice. "Why are you trying to delete me?" he asked. Kyle was shocked. The Mii had just talked to him and he sounded as terrifying as he looked. "I just don't want you on my Mii channel," Kyle responded. "Oh really?" Edeled began to raise his voice. "Mii's have feelings too, you know. How would you feel if I deleted you?" Kyle went to his dad, but nothing weird happened when his dad looked at the screen with him. Kyle's dad left and Edeled was back on the screen, looking very angry. "Goodbye, Kyle." The screen flashed back to the main menu. Kyle tried to open up the Mii channel, but he would always get a message saying, "We deleted you," and it would boot him back to the menu again. Kyle was only allowed to play as Edeled from that point onward. A month later, one of Kyle's friends came over and saw that he had a Wii. Kyle, remembering everything from the month prior, wasn't so interested in playing. Reluctantly, he did at his friend's insistence. After entering the Mii channel, Edeled appeared on the screen. He spoke to Kyle, and his friend was terrified at the back and forth between the two. Kyle apologized to his friend and tried to close the Mii channel, only he couldn't. Edeled would then proceed to dismantle Kyle's Mii. He chopped at him with an axe, while the kids watched in horror. Finally, Edeled cut off the head of the helpless Mii with a smile on his face. Kyle unplugged the Wii and threw it in his closet. His friend was terrified and he told him that he should probably go home. His friend agreed, and as they were walking out of his room, Text appeared on the TV screen. "This is not over," it said. The story of Edeled wouldn't continue until 7 years later. Kyle was now 14 and had tried to forget about the me that terrorized him as a child. For the most part, he did forget. He even bought a second Wii to replace the one he couldn't play anymore. Kyle decided he would look to find out if Edeled was some sort of virus and took the old SD card out of his Wii. He plugged it into a flash drive and then plugged it into his laptop. After searching through the files, Kyle found the Edeled file. He didn't know what to expect, but he opened it anyway. The screen went black before Edeled appeared before him. "I knew you'd come back," he said. Edeled then proceeded to tell him what happens to Miis when they get deleted, how their life ends on a life support machine, how he was the only Mii who knew how to escape the death of the Miis. Edeled explained that even though he could avoid death, he could never be rid of the pain of being deleted. Polybius was an arcade game that existed sometime in the 1980s. It was only available in a few arcades in Portland, Oregon in 1981. The arcade machine was very popular with arcade goers, so much so that lines would form behind any machines. Polybius was created by a company called Sinoslotion, and it was the only game that they would make. The game was so popular that it was borderline addicting for players. Even in 1981, the arcade machine seemed to be the one everyone wanted to play. There was some mystery behind the machine. The Polybius cabinets would receive weekly visits from men in black suits, likely extracting some sort of data from the machine. It was unknown what information they were pulling exactly. It was noted by many who played the cabinet that they would sometimes come away with headaches, minor forms of amnesia, night terrors, and hallucinations. These are a few of the psychoactive effects players reported. The game itself was said to play similarly to another arcade game, Tempest. The addictive properties of the game seemed to have come from something other than the gameplay. It was believed that Polybius was being used for running some sort of government experiment on the people in Portland, Oregon. The game was testing psychoactive effects on the arcade goers in the area. Then that information was being collected by the men in black suits for some unknown purpose. The purpose was thought to be similar to Project MKUltra, an experiment that tested the use of psychedelic drugs as a form of mind control, psychological torture, and interrogation tool. This was backed entirely by the CIA. Polybius was causing psychological damage to its players and is often compared to the project, though no actual connection has ever been established. The data being collected was also never released to the public. The arcade cabinet was gone a month later, seeming to vanish into thin air. The arcade owners had no records of the game, and many don't remember it even existing at all. The elusive Polybius was gone. There are many rumors about Polybius, but most of them are just that, rumors.